have a look at Auntie Jacinda. I can't call her that. It's Auntie Helen for me. If you're perhaps under 40, you can call her Auntie Jacinda if you want. I can't. That would be weird. I was quite impressed with the conversation. The people who hate her are going to hate this more than anything, because she does talk about being kind, and she does talk about things like being kinder. And Brody asked her a question, what do we do? I'm paraphrasing. What do we do in the world where it's fairly obvious we need more kindness? We need more, supporting one another. And we're in this current new climate. It's like we're in a post-kindness world, a post-truth, post-kindness world. What do we do about that?
I don't think I'm about to break it to you, but the world at the moment, as you've said, that's what worries you. There's a lot of things that don't feel very kind at the moment in the world. And you've talked about in the book being an anxious child. I'm being a pretty anxious adult at the moment at the world. So when that is such an important part of the work that you're doing, how does that feel to sort of watch so much of things that aren't to be associated with that sort of unraveling this place that we live in?
I guess that's the time to get louder. The idea.
Just pause there. That's a pretty good answer. To get louder. Like whatever you're doing, if you're fighting for the vulnerable, and it's not going well, and you're living in a post fighting for the vulnerable world, what do? You get louder. If you're fighting for Palestinians, and it looks like the tide of public opinion, which it's not, but if it was going against, what do? You get louder. I just think it's such a great answer for not giving up. Like when it seems that everything's against you, even if the world is in this post-kindness trajectory, what do? You get louder. Love it.
This place that we live in.
I guess that's the time to get louder. The idea that the idea that because what we're seeing amplified, and so many of the political actions that we're seeing on the global stage feel so counter to this idea of kindness, that it's not the time to say, well, therefore, kindness has failed. In fact, that's the time to say, we have lost our empathy in politics. We've lost our sense of humanity, and now is the time to push for that, because that is the answer. That is the answer. I've said this before, empathy never started a war. It doesn't accept the notion that humans and lives, and particularly children, should be sacrificed for political motivation. It actually focuses on people and is a human-centric way of making decisions in politics. So now is the time to be louder about that, not quieter. And I also don't want people to lose a sense of hope, because the moment that you stop expecting politics to be done in a particular way is the moment that you risk indifference. It's the moment that people quieten because they believe it's hopeless. And so I think we have to maintain an expectation of what we want to see on the world stage, what we expect of our global leaders in these times. So now's the time to push harder, not to give up.
Yeah, I think it's a very good answer. It does remind me a little bit, Chewie, of when I don't know if you asked the same conversation, but thematically similar conversation of Chloe, and the first time we had her on, and she said, organise. It's like it's actually do approach in the opposite spirit. Do the opposite of what it's trying to do to keep you down. And I think it was a great answer. I really liked it.
Just a couple of things to her comment of just be louder. Just a point that it is not illegal to own your own megaphone.
You taking that to the UK?
Just saying.
Carry on.
Just take it literally. I know she means probably metaphorically, but you can, as a civilian, own a megaphone, which feels like it should be illegal, but isn't. Just something to think on there. And I'd also like to acknowledge the arrival into our chat of the anti-Jacinda crunchies. You arrived right on cue. It's almost like you've been watching the show, waiting for us to get here. Our engagement thanks you, and we
share
laugh at you.
Share, like and subscribe, and share.
Yeah, look, rage engagement's good. Go for it.
More. All right, we better get some more Jacinda content out there, shall we? Asking questions, again, I'm paraphrasing the questions for us, but why has society unraveled so clearly? It's very, very clear what's happened in society, sort of post-COVID, and society is unraveled, and you've got this kind of post-kindness world, and it's all going off, right, at the moment. And this is where she starts talking about mistrust being a grievance. It's almost like you owe me stuff. You owe me. I'm grieved. It's an interesting perspective. I think it's quite a smart one too.
Why has it unravelled? What's happened? Do you think that we were kind of, in the general sense, the world was sort of chipping away, I don't know, and then the pandemic hit, and then we sort of shot out the other side and things have started to sort of unravel on a global scale from that?
Yeah, I think there's been a range of things going on for some time, and they've actually been magnified and accelerated by a range of different things. Changes in technology, that collective, horrific, difficult human experience of COVID, disinformation, a range of things. And underlying that, or part of what has kind of ridden the wave, I think, of some of those issues, has been people's engagement with politics, but also of those generally who have influence over people's lives. So that includes often the private sector as well. Edelman's been doing a survey for a number of years which tracks people's trust in politics, but also trust in the private sector too. What's been really interesting over recent times is not just their increasing mistrust, which has always gone through waves and cycles around, often mirrored by things like the global financial crisis. But in more recent time, mistrust has turned into a sense of grievance. And that sense of grievance, you can understand that if people are struggling in their lives and they don't believe that there's an adequate response by people in leadership, or they see a growth in inequality, that builds a sense of grievance. And with that sense of grievance has also come an increase in this survey in the number of people who are willing to engage in what they call in the survey hostile acts they see as justified as a consequence of the sense of grievance. And so for me...
So check that out and think about this world we live in today. Sense of grievance justifies a hostile act. Now, well, it doesn't necessarily mean a physical act, but you think about all those people who are now possibly still in the chat going, she said we were going to be kind. Look what happened to me. Look what happened to me. Therefore, I'm going to. What happened on the front, if we're talking COVID, what happened on the front lawn of Parliament in early 2021, I think it was. January 2021, I believe. Could be wrong. Could be 2022. It's all a bit of a blur. Hostile act, hostile takeover area, dummies, effigies going up into the trees that are being hung. Think about what's happening, Posey Parker over in Melbourne, the Nazis turn up, hostile act, but it's justified. And this is the thing. If you have a sense of grievance, right, you've got a grievance against you that gives you the right in your mind to have retribution against that act, even if it's physically violent, but certainly hostile is okay. Now, hostile doesn't have to be violent. It can just be the way you're acting, but I think it's a really interesting perspective. Agree or disagree with what Jacinda's saying. I think it's a really interesting perspective. And it's certainly the perspective, I think, Chewie, that we've seen. The reaction to my grievance is a hostile act. It's very smart.
Yeah, and I think it's an industry. I think there are people out there that can weaponize these people that may think that they've got a legitimate grievance. And maybe if someone took the time and sort of go, well, look, here's how it is. Do you not understand? Let's walk through it together. Instead, they've got somebody talking in their ear, whether it's on a website or a forum or whatever, telling them that no, there's some way to weaponize this or monetize this for my benefit. So I'm going to spin up this army of aggrieved people.
Yeah.
There are so many of them. The #1 podcast in the world. Fucking hell. And this is something that we've never had before. Like the emergence of, and I guess, we're sort of part of that, the emergence of a new format of media, of how people connect. We've never had to deal with this. And then along comes a global issue like COVID.
Yeah.
That forced the issue for so many people. They fell down holes and some have stayed there, some have crawled out of them. And then we're into, boom, the next crisis. The next one.
You've just said something really interesting, though, yeah? That's twigged something in my head. And it makes me think about feeding that algorithm. So you may or may not know this, but on YouTube at the moment, when the right bitches and moans, that really hits the algorithm. And so what that means is the right bitches and moans more, and it hits the algorithm. And a perfect example of it here in New Zealand is Duncan Garner. Duncan Garner's shows last year on the internet were pretty much middle of the road. You know, he was critical of everyone, and it wasn't doing very well numbers-wise. He came back this year. They changed their thumbnail style. It was all very much pointing at the camera and, you know, accusatory and and hostile. And I remember we looked at the page once, and I was like 9 or 12 thumbnails, like 8 or 9 of them were negative about Te Pāti Māori. And his views now have gone through the roof. And so it's feeding the algorithm and this grievance to a hostile act. If you can then provide content to encourage the hostile act or to feed the hostile act, at the moment it's very lucrative. It's very lucrative on your side. And this is not a woe is us, but when you're even though we happily sit on the left, but we spend time and we are fairly balanced, we call balls and strikes and that kind of stuff. We don't leave blood on the floor. It doesn't hit the same algorithms. The algorithms are set up for conflict and for hostility. So what Jacinda's saying here about this grievance culture leading to hostility, you then got content creators providing an outlet for that hostility by feeding the grievance culture. And it's just doing this. Doing this.
You can test this yourself at home. Open up an incognito window, sign out of your YouTube account, make a new one if you want to, or just search it without an account and see what it's like without a recommendations algorithm. It will push right-wing talking points and extreme content at people straight out of the gates. It's fucked. And it's the same on Facebook. I see customers' Facebook feeds all the time. And especially our older folk, the amount of bullshit that those guys get served up, no wonder they're cooked when it comes to public opinion.
This clip, I believe, has about 60 seconds to go. Let's get to the end of it, eh?
You know, as someone who used to be in politics, what's the answer to that? Well, some politicians choose to use blame and to use fear. You feel grievance, here's the people you should blame for that. And here's the reasons you should feel angry. Now, that might bring short-term benefit for politicians globally to do that, but the long-term...
In other words, it's the only reason Winston Peters is. In other words, it's one of the reasons Donald Trump won. So short-term for them, for the politicians, it's worked.
Here's the reasons you should feel angry. Now, that might bring short-term benefit for politicians globally to do that, but the long-term consequences for society are quite significant. Not only polarization, but actually doesn't solve any of the problems people have grievance over. I think the right answer is a hard answer, acknowledging where there's been failures, addressing inequality, addressing some of those core needs that people are struggling with. It takes time, it takes longer, and it means you bear the burden as a politician, but it is in my mind, the right thing to do in these really difficult times. It was a very long answer. But to be fair, it was a tricky question.
Yeah.
You're basically like, the world's really hard right now. Why? And what can we do about it?
No, and look...
All right, got one more clip to play through. I might just roll straight into it if that's all right with you, mate. Because she's basically asked Brodie, someone's asked who is the person. This is Brodie Kane. She's been all over our TV screens. I think she was a One News sports reporter for a while. She is an independent podcaster. Well, independent meaning she runs her own kind of podcast stuff out of Christchurch, and she's obviously working with stuff and stuff at the moment as well to do this. This part of the conversation, they are talking about the COVID situation and the response to COVID. And they do ask, the question is asked about these people have a legitimate concern, whether it's accurate or not. What do we do about that? That's sort of the summation of this next question about those people who, I guess, what do we say to the people who parked on the front lawn of Wellington? It's not quite as black and white as that, but that's the general question.
In terms of there being a group of New Zealanders from all walks of life that are disappointed in your leadership. You write about a woman coming up to you in public toilets in 2022 to thank you for, quote, ruining the country. What do you make of there being people that are angry at you that do believe that?
So I think what I would say is that I know that this is not something just particular to New Zealand, first of all. Interestingly, almost regardless of the approach you took in COVID, I see that group exists in almost every country. Now, I don't say that to somehow say, well, therefore, the fact those groups exist doesn't matter. It does matter. It does matter. And so the first thing I think is for the good of New Zealand, we should stop, take a moment, reflect on what happened so that we can learn from that. And, we've had 2 COVID inquiries doing that, both of which I've appeared before and supported, given evidence to, because I want us to.
Did we hear that, New Zealand? There's been 2, and she's been before both of them, just as a reminder. The narrative spin was she wasn't going to come before the second one. No, she did. The truth was she declined to do that publicly, but she completely appeared before it, just so we're clear. So there's no ambiguity there whatsoever. She did what she was, what she thought she was called to do as the leader. She came before it and she reported to it. She gave the answers. They then wanted to ask her the same questions, but in public, they saw that there wasn't a need for that. Just so we're clear.
Had 2 COVID inquiries doing that, both of which I've appeared before and supported, given evidence to, because I want us to learn those lessons and I want there to be a critique of decision making. I think that's really important for any future situation, which we of course all hope we will not have, but must prepare for. The second thing is, well, if this exists everywhere, then what is the common denominator? And I do think as a global community, we need to start thinking about that, because not just the situation for pandemics, but anywhere we need to build consensus. We need to understand what's standing in our way of being able to have that respectful dialogue that doesn't descend into violence. And we certainly hear some people talking about the need to have those conversations, but I think there needs to be more of it. Finally, at a personal level, there's a documentary now that shows what it was like leading through that period. And I hope if anyone watches that they see, regardless of where you sit on any decision making, I think it's one of those things that just, again, reminds people that there were humans there doing the best they could, politicians and incredible civil servants who I have so much admiration for just doing their best.
I haven't seen the documentary, actually. It's prompted me to remind me about going to see it.
No, I haven't yet either.
Maybe we should all do it. And you're here next Monday, eh? We'll do a review on Monday. You're here next Monday? Yeah?
I'm not here next Monday.
Okay. Maybe you should watch it on
I'll
the
confirm
plane.
to you when I'm leaving this country. Look, my overwhelming thought, and I put it in the chat, I'm going to say it here as well. Remember when we had a smart, empathetic leader that could string together a long concept of thoughts without sounding like a corporate buzzword generator? You remember that? Do you also remember when the people that we are just booting out of our chat, not even for just having a count of you for us, but for being fucking boring? They're just boring. Just, I'm making up a different version of Jacinda's name. All of this sort of stuff. It's so tired and we're so sick of it. It's not triggered. It's boredom. You've got nothing. You could even chalk this up as a win. You army of retards ran this woman out of the country. She had to pack up her family and go to another country because you guys can't form a coherent argument without being abusive, threatening someone's life on the internet, chasing her with cars and confronting her in public toilets. Fuck you.
And that's not the worst
for
story.
Not being able to manage your feelings or put your argument out there like an actual grown adult, or even like most of us were able to go, you know what, this is for the common good. This is the best information anybody has. We're doing this for other people. I'm going to do it. I'm going to trust that there's people that know more than me. Not someone that's gone to the fucking internet university of Telegram and decided that you know more than these people that have studied for literal decades, experts in their field, people that have trained to make these decisions and were elected by the people to make those tough decisions. You decided you knew more, but the only thing you had was ignorance and anger. And you've cost us a generational leader, and now we have Christopher fucking Luxon and the worst economy in the OECD. And arguably a more divided country than we had when COVID was here.
Yeah.
You're a net negative to this country.
It
and
is
I'll
interesting.
keep on reloading the fucking Zap cannon in the chat because I'm bored of you.
It is interesting to see about what we've lost. And I do sometimes think about the American system where you can only be president for 8 years. And I think if they didn't have that in, I wonder if Obama would still be president. Now, there's lots politically to complain about with Obama. You know, the war crimes he committed and stuff. But as far as the intelligence of a politician versus what came after him, it's pretty much night and day. And it feels like it's sort of the same. What could we have right now if Jacinda basically hadn't been chased out of the country? And look, I don't blame her at all. I mean, the story that she just told in the public toilets, we've heard a far worse story than that from a dairy in Coromandel, where the same thing was screamed at her about ruining the country. I'm not going to say the full abuse because it is quite horrible, but the C word was used in there as well, directly to her in public in front of her child, along with some other expletives. Sorry, New Zealand, you don't get to do that and keep it. I actually agree with you, Chewie, a generational leader. I remember interviewing Michelle Acourt through that period, and she was talking about voting. So it would have been pre-2020. It was probably during the first stages of the pandemic. And she said, why would I vote for an average man over an exceptional woman? And we lost an exceptional leader because of a huge number of average New Zealanders. Now, if anyone gets offended by that and they're thinking that I'm calling them detestable or whatever the American terms are, whatever. We lost a generational leader over some very, very average New Zealanders' complaints. So, and the disinformation dozen are the ones who are ultimately responsible for spreading that bullshit and notice how it's all dying. You used the phrase before, Chewie, there's going to be a reality check about another story. And I thought there might be a trademark on that for one particular, and it's like no one talks about them anymore. They're still around because they're still getting their money from the farmers and stuff, but it's yesterday's news. Like you say, it's boring. It's yesterday's news.
I got a COVID booster yesterday with my flu vaccination because I'm going to lock myself in an aluminium tube and fly to the other side of the world. You know, it's just a sensible precaution.
Yeah.
Right? My blood's not going to turn black. My heart's not going to explode. This is, you know, I think just the absolute willful misunderstanding of what a vaccination was or what the COVID shot did. And look, a lot of that is because we were working it out on the fly with the best information we had at the time, and now we're looking back in hindsight and going, oh, well, it didn't stop you getting COVID. No, but it stopped you from going to hospital.
Well, if we're being accurate, we're saying it gave you a much lesser chance of going to hospital. Look, this is where it gets boring, Chewie, because how many times have we said, how many times have our guests said, how many times have I said, you know what? First round of COVID, first rounds of vaccines, it did pretty much stop you getting it. COVID changed. Pretty clear the vaccine hadn't changed with it. Didn't stop you necessarily from getting it. But for most people, it stopped the effects of that being far, far worse. Yeah. Like how you can crash your car. I don't even want to have these fucking conversations anymore. I was going to do the seatbelt analogy. I'm over it. We're done. You're wrong, people. We're done.
I was just going to say one thing. People heard vaccinations and thought it was like the measles vaccination, that it would stop you getting it, right? They didn't look into it any further. But yeah, it's the difference between being in bed for a week and feeling pretty shitty or being on a ventilator if there's one available.
Yeah. All right.
And maybe that wasn't explained so well. But yeah, as you said, we've had these discussions. Yeah. The information was out there, and we have a cohort of this country that did not want to listen.
Yeah.
And they still don't want to listen. And I think that if you've dug a trench and you've gone, this is the position I'm going to sit in and I'm not going to move, well, that's cool, man. You do you. But the rest of us will look at your silly little fort that you've built and just laugh about how irrelevant you are in your lesser and lesser numbers.
Let me just say this right now. Basically, if you're in that camp, you're a flat earther. And, you know, it has been fun debating flat earthers. I like debating flat earthers, but flat earthers don't then lead to more people dying, typically. And I just don't want to, I'm not going to debate flat earthers anymore. It's like just if you're in that camp, and you want to know why we disagree with you, go search our catalogue. go into YouTube, go into the search bar on the Big Hairy Network and put COVID in there. You'll get dozens, perhaps more clips coming up. Go and watch them. I'm done trying to convince anybody now.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
So
not
I'm speaking
just
of that.
Jacinda, it's Susie Wiles, it's all of those people that were spending their own time as private citizens trying to communicate the information from their fields to people. They were hounded, they were threatened. Like it's that consistent thing of like, oh, the internet lets me reach out to anyone. I'm going to use it to send a death threat because I'm a bloody bad word.